Whew, it has been a while since I have done any of these type of videos, but I am back with a ranking video, ranking all of the figures that I've gotten in 2023. Now, I will make a disclaimer in this video that I'm going to end up making multiple videos regarding all the figures I got in 2023, but there were some that I got in 2023 that didn't necessarily come out in 2023, but came out in 2022. So I will make that note in this video once I, finish this and it goes up. In this one, I will be ranking all of my favorite figures that I got in 2023 that were released in Legacy, Evolution, Studio Series 86, and the new Studio Series Gamer Edition line that's bringing back some of the War for Cybertron and Fall Cybertron characters. And if you're wondering why Studio Series 86 and Gamer Edition is here as opposed to being with the normal Studio Series figures, well, considering they fall in line with Generations as a whole and Studio Series focusing on the movie figures, I put separately since the live action movie figures would fall into their own category since they make up the majority of Studio Series. And henceforth, they will be part of a different video where I will cover them and rank them. My personal favorite, of course, I didn't get everyone that was released as part of 2023, nor did I get everyone that was released this year. And speaking of 2022 figures, there are some that I missed out on when I first, started getting into Legacy. And some of these 2022 figures were released in 2023 due to poor distribution, which has been a plague since the pandemic back in 2020, where distribution today still sucks. And I will talk about my favorite 2022 figures as part of Legacy and Studio Series in different videos as well. And I know I am a month late to the party, and I say a month late because by the time this video goes up, it'll have already been February. So as of this recording, it's probably already February, and I am a month late to what other people and reviewers have been doing, and looking at their favorite figures, whether it be a top 10, top 15, or top 20. And given that I cannot, calm myself down when it comes to figures, I have gathered essentially about 20 figures here. I may or may not make an honorable mention to one that will not be on the list, as some of these will, be taking a shared slot, like for example, Tarn and Bludgeon, who I have over here. They will be taking a joint spot, same with Lyo Convoy and Nemesis Lyo, and even the Junkions. So with that out of the way, let's get down to the honorable mention before I talk about my least favorite in the line. Well, these lines. So an honorable mention goes to Legacy Evolution Crosscut. Now, I know how people feel about the Skids mold, and it is not a good mold to a lot of people. I'm probably one of the few who actually likes it, because while it's not like the Thrilling 30 figure, which people now seem to praise, I like this figure for a couple of reasons. One, I never had the Thrilling 30 Crosscut, nor am I familiar with this character, but at the same time, as someone who already got Skids back in 2022 when he was released, I opted to go for Crosscut anyways, since I kind of figured he would be one of the shelf warmers in the wave he was released in. Accessories and the mold are pretty much the same as Skids, obviously the difference being the battle mask, which we did see on the Legacy Velocitron Speedy F500 Deluxe Burnout, which I also have, and the only reason why I got Burnout, who I will mention here, is because if I never got Crosscut, well, at least I would have a version of the mold with the masked face. Again, the figure pose is good, and I get why people have its issues, especially with the hollow legs and the fact that, you know, he looks kind of plain, but then again, most G1 characters look plain to some, and that they prefer the IDW looks, which, yeah, I get it. But Crosscut being, you know, just a new head retool of a figure that not a lot of people like and very few do. I'm one of the few who probably does. So, yeah, Crosscut is my honorable mention, and there are a few that I was going to think about putting in honorable mention just to make the actual list shorter. But I was like, you know what, because they share the same mold, they're going to take the same spot. Of course, either the first is, you know, better, and I will get to that when we get to the rankings. Is anyone surprised by the fact that this figure is at the bottom spot of my ranking and list of top favorite figures of 2023? Yeah, Cloudcover here, who was released in the Toxitron collection of G2 figures. Now, for those who are unaware of the history, this figure, and I will eventually do a review of him and the others that I've gotten, was essentially, you know, a redeco of Ramjet in, you know, these colors, these camo colors of a sky blue and white with, you know, obviously black and checkers. Obviously, being a redeco of Ramjet, he kind of had to take, like, the bottom spot of the list, since there were other figures that, you know, are redecos or retools, but I find them to be just a bit better, and you're going to see those on the list if you haven't seen them in the opening. Again, this figure as a whole is just a retool of the Earthrise Starscream, but I personally, from a personal standpoint, I like the cone heads a bit more than the mold for Starscream, Skywarp, and Thundercracker, only because, well, if this is the best we're going to get to G1 accurate cone heads, well, it's not really a big deal. But again, the articulation is pretty lacking with the lack of a waist joint and wrist joint, since, again, it feels like an upscale of the Classics mold from 2006. Now, seeing as Cloudcover is a new character, there really isn't much to say about him, since, again, he's basically just this color version of Ramjet. And I will bring out Dirge for a comparison, because Dirge was also released this year, but the difference why I included Cloudcover and not Dirge on the list was because, well, Dirge is a repack from the Earthrise figure, because as many of you may not be aware, or are aware, Dirge was part of a 2-pack with Ramjet that was released exclusively in Amazon, and given the pandemic happening in 2020, Dirge and Ramjet saw very limited release. So Hasbro did the smart thing and reissued Dirge in 2023 as part of Legacy Evolution. Now, if only we can get a re-release of Ramjet and Thrust, because Thrust was also an exclusive, but he was an exclusive to Target, and even then, he was also hard to find. So, yeah, Cloudcover takes the bottom spot on my list. Taking the 19th spot on my list goes to Studio Series Gamer Edition War for Cybertron Deluxe Cliffjumper. I'm going to admit it, this figure kind of sucks. Like, I want to like it, I do, especially because it's War for Cybertron, Fall Cybertron, Cliffjumper, but there's things I like about this figure, but then there's a reason why it's kind of low on the list. For one, the backpack transformation, and I'm going to have a complaint about that, is that every time I transform him, the backpack wants to untab. And another thing, which I kind of did here, that you're seeing now, is a leg swap, because when Cliffjumper and Bumblebee were released and were made, they were made with the actual ankles going the outer way. So I made it to where Cliffjumper actually has the ankles here. Of course, it means that the thighs are going to look out of place, but I would like to pose my figures without, feeling like crap in that sense. And he does come with the same weapons that Bumblebee had, the blade, the plasma cannon, and I believe this was a sniper rifle in the game. I could be wrong, because I have not, as someone who has not played the game, but, is familiar with it and the designs, as well as the weapons, I have a tendency to forget what the game has, because I am a bit of a forgetful person. But I do like this figure. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's things I like about it, but then it's the cons outweigh the pros, and it's like, this is the 5th figure in the Gamer Edition line, and this line has been off to a bit of a rocky start, especially since if Hasbro's focusing on Legacy and Studio Series, then whatever line they're introducing is kind of getting the short end of the stick, and it sucks that Gamer Edition is getting the short end of the stick with the War for Cybertron designs and characters. Which leads me into my next candidate, who is a fellow Gamer Edition release. Taking the 18th spot on the ranking and list goes to Gamer Edition War for Cybertron Megatron. Now, as mentioned with Cliffjumper, this subline has gotten off to a rocky start, and so far the only good looking one in terms of posing and all that has so far been Optimus Prime. Bumblebee and Cliffjumper have been hit or miss. Barricade, from what I've heard, sucks ass, and Megatron has been kind of mid. And I say that because he may not be like the original Deluxe, especially since they were doing more with him as a Voyager, and this is a Voyager. But the cannon feels a bit small because they had to make the figure transform, and as a result of it, the cannon kind of feels like it got the short end of the stick because it's not as big or as pronounced as it is in the game. The mace, however, I do like, and it's probably my favorite aspect about the figure. And obviously, if you want to get weird, you can do this, which... This is the one thing I will admit that I like about the Gamer Edition figures, that they incorporate the weapons into the actual arms, which requires you to remove the arm. And that's so far as to where my praises will go with this line and these figures. But Megatron kind of falls short, obviously not as short as Cliffjumper, because I have my problems with that figure, but he's still good. It's like, and now that Starscream has been released, or well, revealed, Megatron kind of doesn't live up to that same expectation. Of course, Starscream has his own problems, and the more Gamer Edition figures that are going to get leaked and, shown off at some point in the near future, because I think Hasbro wants to delve into the War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron games, but they're kind of starting off with a rocky start, because these figures don't feel like these figures feel like Studio Series back in 2018, where they weren't as good and they had flaws, and new Studio Series figures coming out now, including Studio Series 86, have been peak for lack of a better term. Now, my main problem with Megatron was something that I'm going to mention in his eventual review when I get to it, is the fact that he has tabs, useless tabs, on the back of his knees, which I cut off and shaved down the tabs that were on the back of his knees so he could actually bend at the knees. Obviously, it's still a glaring flaw because he can't actually bend, and it would require a bit of mistransformation. And the only reason why I put him higher than Cliffjumper is because, well, while I did not play War for Cybertron, I did play the Wii game Cybertron Adventures. So I, got a little bit of War for Cybertron with that Wii game and, the characters and this design. Is it bad? No. Is it good? Not really. It could have been better. Because it's accurate to how Megatron appeared in the actual game. Same with Cliffjumper. And as much as I would base these figures on accuracy, I am basing them on enjoyability, playability, posing, all of that. Because I would like to pose my figures and transform them without them feeling like, But the rest of the figures that I'm going to be mentioning in this ranking have either been mid or peak. Taking a joint spot at number 17 goes to Legacy Evolution Deluxe Scraphook and the retool into Robots in Disguise 2001 Tow Line. Obviously, it was a hard decision to pick between these two as well as the other Junkions, Crash Bar and Trash Master. I did not get Axle Grease, unfortunately, because Axle Grease, she was a bit hard to find, and seeing as she is a retool of Scraphook, she would have likely been in this joint spot with them. Now, the only reason why I included Tow Line was because while he's not the better looking one of this mold, and it makes sense that it still doesn't make sense as to why they would make him a retool rather than his old mold, because for those who don't know, Robots in Disguise Tow Line was a brand new mold that I believe was based off of Machine Wars hubcap and transformed into a tow truck, which I guess that's probably why they chose Scraphook to base off of. Like, the only thing that's accurate on this figure is the colors and the new head sculpt, but aside from that, he's pretty much just the same as Scraphook. Now, this figure is actually really good. My copy of Tow Line, on the other hand, is a bit loose in areas, and the reason why I was debating on who to really put at this spot, because I was initially putting all of the Junkions and Tow Line in this spot, but I realized it wouldn't really be fair, because I would have to talk about all of them individually, because Crash Bar is good, Trash Master is good, and Axle Grease is also good, even though I don't have her. And obviously these Legacy Junkions are doing what the Fossilizers and Weaponizers did back in the War for Cybertron Trilogy toy lines, but the difference is you don't have to take them apart to transform them. Like Scraphook, Crash Bar, Trash Master, and Axle Grease, you don't have to take them apart, like take their limbs apart. Obviously you have to take their accessories off and put them in their proper spot, but in terms of a transformation, they actually transform without having to actually disassemble, except there have been times where I've had to actually remove the arms in order to actually transform them, but they still stay in one piece in transformation, and you don't have to like do what the Weaponizers or Fossilizers did, where you have to actually take them apart and then put them back together to transform, which is a direction that I actually don't mind. And another thing, while Tow Line is already an existing character, the main reason why these two are like at a lower spot is because we don't have much attraction or attention with the Legacy Junkions, since the Legacy Junkions are new characters. Tow Line isn't, but I still don't like how this was a simple head retool and recolor of this. Like, again, that's the reason why they're sharing a joint spot, because of the mold and because I have to get some of my problems out of the way. But again, I like this mold. Not as much as Crash Bar or Trash Master, but they're all on equal footing. But they're not, at least with Tow Line, he should be considered mid. But at least with Scraphook and the other Junkions, they're at least considered good, because they're new molds and essentially new characters that we have no connection to. Coming in at the number 16 spot is Legacy Evolution Cyberverse Shadow Striker. Now, I know there has been a lot of hate garnered towards this figure. Of course, the reason for that is because she is essentially a pre-tool of Robots in Disguise 2001 Sideburn. My counter-argument, I like this figure because she's a hybrid amalgamation of the Cyberverse character, at least with the head sculpt and the color scheme, and the Universe 2003 Shadow Striker, who, as some of you may not be aware of, the original Shadow Striker from Universe 2003 was basically a new head retool and new color redeco of Robots in Disguise Sideburn. And that figure also got, a second reuse as her sister Roulette, who, if we're getting Sideburn from this mold eventually, then Roulette would be in the realm of possibility as well, since they've shared a mold before. Now, while many of us, including myself, would have liked her to be based more so on Cyberverse or IDW, if they're going this route, since, again, she is a hybrid of her original 2003 design and her now famous Cyberverse design. But I like this figure for not just for being a pre-tool of Sideburn, who I am looking forward to, but also because it's another female Decepticon who has taken the spotlight in recent years, since up until Cyberverse, I bet no one had heard of Shadow Striker, and I certainly didn't. But there is a lot to like about this figure, despite the hate towards it, because, again, the car roof as the shield, the missile launcher in reference to the original toy and Sideburn himself, this piece can double as a shield, and obviously I will get into detail in her actual review, which I will eventually get to doing. And the gun turns into a blade, supposedly, because there is a blade part of the gun to where she can actually use it as a weapon. Though obviously it comes off as more of a blunt weapon, like a nightstick that police would use. Now again, she is only low on this list because she is essentially a pre-tool, and not being accurate to Cyberverse and more so her original universe design. Of course, we could always see the Universe 2003 Shadow Striker get released in Generation Selects or whatever. They would release her again in those Universe 03 colors, and obviously give her a new head sculpt if they were to, do Roulette. But I do not hate this figure. I will admit, I do not hate this figure. I get that a lot of people do, because it's not accurate to Cyberverse, with her first design or her Frankenstein design that she would have throughout the series. And for those of you who have not seen Cyberverse and do not know this character yet, do yourself a favor, go see Cyberverse and get an idea on who this character is. Coming in at number 15 is Legacy Evolution Robots in Disguise 2015 Strongarm. Now, for those of you wondering why I put Strongarm above Shadow Striker, well, I actually like the Legacy Elita 1 Minerva mold. Now, yes, I know she is a retool of that mold, but they did a lot of retooling to make her, accurate to her appearance in 2015's Robots in Disguise. And being one of the breakout characters of that series, it made sense that this version of Strongarm, because there have been other versions before, made the name and the design popular. And yes, she does have this design in the IDW comics, I believe. So while it's not fully Robots in Disguise 2015 accurate, it can also be IDW accurate, because what they were able to do was get the shoulder pads right with the placement of the wheels, and the doors on the back, though they hang a bit lower than how they did in Robots in Disguise, where they were more pronounced by being up. And given the placement of the wheels on the back of the legs, I guess that made sense for why Hasbro ended up reusing the Elita 1 Minerva mold. Now, do I like this figure? Well, for Strongarm, it's hit or miss for me, because I actually like Minerva and Elita 1 more since they came first. And I will talk about them in a different video. But as for Strongarm, she comes close enough to Robots in Disguise accurate, unlike some of the Prime characters who tried. But yeah, there really isn't much to say about this figure. Like at best, it's just mid. Coming in at the number 14 spot goes to Legacy Evolution Detritus. This figure made it a bit higher than some of the others I mentioned, because while he is a heavy retool of the Siege Hound mold, giving him an Earth mode, I still like this mold, and it's essentially Hound. The mold is basically just Hound. And speaking of, Hasbro is currently finding a way to try and release that Earth mode Hound, though I guess that's why they put out Detritus first, so that way the mold can be out on shelves, and then Hound can eventually see a release. Hence why he is on the list and not an honorable mention, because I liked the original Siege Hound and the Netflix redeco, which I have. So to have this figure again, but as a different character and with the Earth mode, and Detritus being a Junkion mercenary, because something I like, and I will get into his review because I have a lot of figures that are on this list that I have not reviewed yet, since I was kind of taking a break from reviews in 2023 with as you can see, he has an Autobot symbol and a Decepticon symbol. So he's essentially a mercenary, and the story behind Detritus is that he essentially wants to overthrow Wreck-Gar and take command of the Junkions. As for why he shares a body mold with Hound, that's anyone's guess, but then again, Hasbro and Takara, because I believe Detritus' original G1 toy was released as an eHobby exclusive in Takara's markets in Japan. But yeah, he comes with an accurate shoulder cannon and an accurate blaster that we do see on Hound. Again, the only reason why he's not higher up on the list is because he's just a redeco retool of a character we want to have in our collection, since those of us who have the Siege mold were content with it, but then we wanted an Earth mode. And if this is the best that they can give us by, simply retooling the mold, because again, Hasbro and Takara have done retools before in the past where they took some of the Siege molds and turned them into Earth modes, the most famous example being Siege Sideswipe and Siege Red Alert, both share the same mold, and were remade into their Earth mode forms. But as this figure stands, I like it, and I already had the Siege mold. I get that people won't be interested in it and won't like it as much, but that's just them. And this is coming from me because I have different standards. I don't care if my standards are considered low or considered high, depending on what figures I put lower or higher on my own rankings. This is my list. We all have opinions, and I know people can be very opinionated. But yes, I like this figure, and I like the idea behind Detritus as a whole. Taking the 13th spot on my ranking list video goes to Legacy Evolution Shrapnel. they finally got his name back, one. And two, this is a really good mold. Like this figure is a really good figure. Like he is that close to the G1 animation model. If I edit this video and I were able to find an image and show a comparison with how accurate Shrapnel is to his original toy and cartoon model, yeah, I like him. I do have an issue with him and why he's low on the list. It's the head. The fact that his head is surrounded by, accurate kibble with the stag beetle mode pinchers and this hanging off the side, it makes his head hard to get to. Now, what I did was unscrew the back, take him apart, and do something to make the head, loose. It did work, but at the same time it didn't, because, the head is still on a tight swivel, which means it is kind of difficult to make his head rotate the full 360. If you can just get a left and right, then you're good. But it is still annoying, and why he's a bit lower on the list. One saving grace that this figure has for me is the very stupid Evo Fusion gimmick that Hasbro put into this line of Legacy. It's basically just combining the weapons to make a bigger one. Like, it's basically just that. Is it stupid? Yes. Do I love it? Also yes. Of course, this means the other Insecticon, who's going to be on this list that was also released in 2023, is a bit higher than Shrapnel. Taking the 12th spot on the list goes to Legacy Evolution Bombshell. Is anyone surprised that he beat Shrapnel? I don't think anyone should be surprised that Bombshell beat Shrapnel, because unlike Shrapnel, at least the head restriction isn't there, and he can actually move his head since we have a grip on it. And despite reusing some parts of Shrapnel, since, again, it's weird how he looks like a new mold, but he is essentially a heavy remold of Shrapnel. But then I kind of like how this works. Like if they weren't gonna do a new mold for him, I guess it makes sense to reuse some parts of an existing figure. Of course, the leg transformation that they have is different, and I kind of like the Evo Fusion gimmick on Bombshell more than Shrapnel, because it's basically just taking the legs and putting them on the actual gun, rather than taking the legs and making a longer gun. And this part where he fires his Cerebro shells is also Blast Effect compatible. Obviously, if I wanted to bring out the blast effects, which I can still do, I would have probably done so already, but as Bombshell stands, I think he's the highlight out of the wave he came with, and that wave being Detritus, Shadow Striker, and Strongarm. Like, Bombshell is like the best one of that wave, with Strongarm probably being second best, maybe Shadow Striker, and then Detritus being like the lowest, because again, people really have mixed feelings and opinions on the recent wave, on that last wave of Legacy, because with Legacy United having been announced and now popping up on store shelves, this current wave of Deluxes is likely going to shelf warm, because stores are likely not going to get rid of them. But as Bombshell stands, I think he's a really good figure, and was not expecting him to be a retool, heavy remold of Shrapnel. Do I like him? Obviously, and he's obviously accurate to his G1 self, which is what Generations was striving for with not just G1 characters, but also Beast Wars characters, Robots in Disguise characters. And even the Unicron Trilogy characters, though when we get to the animated and Prime characters, they're a different story. But I will talk to those when I get to two particular characters who are a bit higher up on the list, because I like them. Coming in at spot number 11 goes to the Legacy Evolution Toxtron Collection G2 Universe Grimlock. Now I know what you guys are saying. Ew! Ew, it's the G2 colors. Well, it's the unreleased G2 colors, not the normal G2 colors release. And I know all of you are still gonna say ew and disgusting. You wanna know why Grimlock is on this list? I never got Studio Series 86 Grimlock. Like, Studio Series 86 Grimlock, which is a really good mold that I'm gonna talk about, goes for astronomical prices on the aftermarket. The Shattered Glass Colors Grimlock was a decent release, despite the fact that all the Shattered Glass color figures are exclusives, and the Toxtron collection of figures are basically characters in their unreleased Generation 2 colors, and Grimlock being one of those G1 toys who got G2 colors, but not the colors we know, but these unreleased colors, where he's yellow, I don't know if it's a turquoise blue, a weird shade of pink or purple. It's a pinkish purple. Like, again, I get why people would skip out on this figure because, well, it's not appealing. Like, G2 being in the early 1990s was not that appealing, as half of it was basically just G1 redos. Now, as a figure, it's a really good figure because this is Studio Series 86 Grimlock. It's the colors that suck and would deter people away from it. And hopefully Hasbro finds a way to re-release Studio Series 86 Grimlock, and probably by the time I'm editing this, they have already revealed a Marvel Comics deco of G1 Grimlock using the Studio Series 86 mold. Once that comes out, this figure I may, get rid of after I do a review on it, because I'm likely not going to keep this once the Marvel Comics Grimlock comes out, because I would like to have a better colored Grimlock rather than the G2 colors. But, like, the mold is good. Like, this Grimlock is a really good mold, to where it made sense that he would have a bunch of redecos and re-releases. Obviously, this figure needs more re-releases than the other Dinobots, but in saying that, only, to me, Slag or Slug, whatever you want to call him, is the one who deserves a second chance at a release, since, again, Grimlock was really hard to find, and Slag/Slug was also hard to find. I got lucky when I went to Universal back in 2023 and I found Slag. But overall, as a figure, he's good. But the color scheme, isn't. But, I kind of got him just to have this mold. And because Grimlock is one of my favorite characters. So, yeah.